For 3 days, Command assumed she was dead until a single transmission shattered the silence. They dropped in at 0300. No lights, no sound, just rotor wash melting into the void. The forest below was dense, unforgiving, and cold, every branch like a bone waiting to snap. 3 operatives slipped from the belly of the bird and vanished into the dark. Echo 7 was the last to hit the ground. She said nothing as the team fell into formation. They didn't speak unless necessary. The mission required more listening than talking. Parabolic mix, drones, signal intercepts, deep recon behind an unstable border where loyalties shifted like the wind. The objective, monitor an emergent paramilitary group rumored to have acquired a prototype weapon system. Simple eyes and ears op. 5 days in and out. No kills, no trails, no attention. But even the most surgical plans can bleed. The first 18 hours were uneventful. They moved silently through the brush, tracking heat signatures from a kilometer out, marking supply routes, photographing armaments. They watched from tree lines as trucks arrived at a remote bunker compound, hidden in a mountain crease. Intel confirmed what Command had suspected: weapon crates with foreign insignia, unauthorized personnel with military-grade gear, encrypted. COMMS. Then the storm came. Bio to O on the second night. Clouds rolled in low and fast. Visibility dropped to nothing. The team set up a temporary blind in the roots of a fallen pine. Rain began to churn the soil to paste. Echo 7 monitored the narrow bend feed while the other 2 took turns resting. Then static. A break. In the line. At first, she thought it was atmospheric interference, but then she caught it chatter. Overlapping dialects, no encryption. Local militia, too close for comfort. She reached for the transmitter to alert the team lead. That's when the sound came, the unmistakable mechanical clack of a safety being switched off. Somewhere just beyond the blind, reflex kicked in. She dropped the transmitter, rolled to the left, and pulled her sidearm without hesitation. Gunfire exploded through the blind with splintered. Someone screamed. Chaos erupted in seconds. Muzzle flashes tore open the night. The team scattered. She never saw where the lead went. The second operative, a specialist in long-range optics, was hit, dragged himself into cover, and waved her off with his last good hand. No time, no choice. She bolted downhill into the ravine, bullets stitching the air behind her. She ran until her lungs begged for oxygen, until the only sound was her heartbeat in her ears. She didn't stop until the forest went quiet again, and then she was alone. She found cover under a crag of rock, wrapped in shadow and wet leaves, and forced herself to assess. The radio was damaged, part of the casing cracked when she fell. Battery levels were dropping faster than expected. She attempted to patch into the fallback frequency. Static, then nothing. The line had gone dark. Protocol demanded she try 3 times. She did. No response. That was the last transmission Command would receive for 72 hours. By dawn, she was already miles from the ambush point, moving without a map, her GPS corrupted. She relied on terrain memory and instinct. No smoke, no prints, no patterns. She buried her secondary beacon under a cairn of stones laced with metallic shards to throw off thermal drones. No electronic signature meant no trail to follow, or to be followed. The forest was alien. Sounds came from nowhere and everywhere. Distant dogs, the echo of trucks, a cough from someone she couldn't see. She avoided every path, crawled when she had to, and crossed a shallow river that numbed her to the bone. Her boots left no trace on the slick rocks. Sleep became a dangerous luxury. She took it in fragments, 10-minute intervals, with her back to a stone wall, rifle across her chest, one eye half open. On the second night, she found an old roofless shed in the ruins of a forgotten village. Inside were cracked clay tiles, rotted blankets, and a broken radio older than she was. It looked like it hadn't worked since the Cold War. She stayed there just long enough to clean and reset her weapon. Her thoughts began to drift. Unbidden, training scenarios. The sound of instructors barking during simulations. A fellow cadet collapsing during escape. Drills. A briefing where the phrase expendable asset had been tossed out with bureaucratic detachment. She shoved the memories away. Focus kept her alive. She spotted a drone the next morning to high for small arms. It circled once, then vanished. Behind the hills, she moved again, deeper into wilderness, rationed the last of her protein tabs, drank from rainwater pooled in a broken tire. By now, Command would have flagged her as Mia, maybe even presumed Kier. They wouldn't send anyone. Not yet. Not for a ghost in enemy territory without signal or trace. She knew the numbers. After 48 hours of silence, the odds of recovery dropped by 60%. After 72, they stopped keeping statistics. She pressed on anyway. By late afternoon on the third day, she stumbled upon the ruins of a downed scout vehicle, burnt out, forgotten. The kind used by the paramilitary group weeks earlier, before they acquired newer gear. The wreck was useless, except for the cracked dashboard where a primitive transmitter still blinked faintly. Beneath layers of dust. It was a gamble. Every second of power she drew from the ruined battery might light her up like a flare on enemy radar. But staying silent wasn't survival anymore. It was suicide. She opened her pack, pieced together a makeshift antenna from a disassembled multi-tool, and the remnants of her broken comms array. She used a shard of mirrored glass to reflect light through a pinhole, a crude Morse lamp. Then, with gloved fingers trembling from cold and blood loss she hadn't acknowledged, she tapped out a single word, torchlit, a coded phrase known only to her team and Command. It meant, still alive, not compromised, location unstable. Then she killed the signal. If anyone had heard it, they'd know where to look. If the wrong people heard it, they'd know where to hunt. She waited in the dark, listening to the wind rustling through the trees, trying not to imagine the sound of footsteps that might come next. She had 72 hours of silence behind her. And if no one came, she'd go deeper. She wasn't done yet. The silence didn't just surround her, it consumed her. After sending the one-word transmission torchlit, she sat beneath the broken scout vehicle, back pressed against scorched metal, heart hammering so loudly she swore it would betray her. She didn't know if anyone had picked it up. The makeshift antenna had held for maybe 10 seconds. It might not have been enough, but it was the only option left. She stayed there until night swallowed the wreck. Then she moved, slowly, one step at a time. No lights, no trail, no sound. The pain in her side pulsed with every breath. Something had torn during the second day. Maybe a rib cracked when she fell from the riverbank. There was no time to check. Pain was useful. It reminded her she was still alive, still unbroken. At Command, the silence was something else entirely. The last known coordinates placed Echo 7 in the kill zone of a hostile ambush. Drone feeds showed infrared blurs scattering into the trees, followed by heat blooming like flowers. Gunfire, explosions, movement, then nothing. By the time surveillance was re-established, the area was empty, cold. The operative's call sign had not appeared on any frequency since. No biometric tags, no signal flares. There were debates in the dark halls of the command center. Analysts argued for a postmortem classification. A recovery unit suggested a quiet extraction, retrieve what they could, mark the site, and move on. A few voices pushed back, quiet but firm. She's still out there. But Echo 7 didn't need them to believe. She needed them to wait. The second night was worse than the first. Hunger had shifted from a background growl to a sharp, biting presence. Her last energy tablet had dissolved on her tongue that morning, leaving behind nothing but chalky bitterness and a fading sense of control. She drank from a stream fouled with leaves and something long dead upstream. She didn't care. The water kept her standing. At some point she found herself near a hunting shack likely used by locals before the region turned red on every map. It had collapsed years ago, but underneath the floorboards, half-rotted blankets and a nest of sticks concealed a hidden crawl space. She buried herself inside, body curled like a wire coil, rifle across her knees. That night, voices passed above her, not English, not local dialect, military cadence, men trained to sweep, search, execute. She didn't breathe, not once. One of them lingered. Bootsteps paused over the boards. Silence stretched into something unbearable. She imagined the muzzle of a rifle pointing down, imagined the sound of her own breath giving her away. But then the voice called out, and the boots moved on. She waited, an hour before crawling out. The smell of dust and rot clung to her clothes, but she was alive. Still in the game. Her memories started to fragment. Not because she forgot, but because survival forced her to compress everything. Entire hours vanished into a blur of movement and tension. At one point she saw the shadow of her team leader step from behind a tree. Arm raised in silent signal. She almost called out. It wasn't real. By the third day, her hands shook constantly. Cold, stress, lack of food, it all piled into her bloodstream like poison. Still, her instincts hadn't failed. She kept moving at night, resting in daylight beneath foliage or against dead stumps, always watching, always waiting for a pattern she could exploit. She found a rusted signal tower in the early morning, maybe 50 feet tall, choked by vines. The ladder was brittle, but she climbed anyway. From the top, she spotted smoke. Not campfire smoke, controlled, structured, like something burning in metal drums. A sign of operations. She noted the direction, logged it mentally. If she made it out, the intel would matter. At the same time, her thoughts began turning inward. She remembered the last conversation she had before the mission. Nothing personal, just a logistics brief. She couldn't recall the sound of her own voice, couldn't remember the last time someone had looked her in the eye. The solitude wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Total. And back at HQ, the question grew heavier. Do we go in blind, or leave her to fate? By then, her file had been locked for internal review. Details classified above clearance. One of the analysts, young, quiet, too smart for his own good, found a personal note in her psych profile. Not a weakness, a pattern. A phrase she had used during final assessments. I was trained to disappear. It was meant to inspire confidence. But now it made everything harder. At noon on the third day, the forest fell quiet again. No wind, no birds. She paused near a thicket, ears straining. Something felt wrong, too still. Then she heard it, a soft rustle, barely audible. She froze, knees bent, safety off. A figure moved behind the brush, cautious, methodical, not searching, just traveling. She waited, watched, didn't engage. But it confirmed what she suspected. The area was still hot. She turned and slipped away, hugging a ridge line that gave her visual cover for miles. Then she descended into another valley, this one laced with rock and thorn. It was there she saw it. A glint, something unnatural, a camera, hidden, small, recent. She was being watched. But not by them. Within the hour, a whisper came through her comms. Not a full voice, just a tone. A confirmation ping. The signal had been received. Somewhere, someone was listening. She looked up at the sky, now cloudless and pale, and allowed herself a breath she hadn't taken in 3 days. Not hope, not relief. Just air. It wasn't over, but it had begun to shift. She rolled her shoulders, checked her weapon, and began to move again. The silence hadn't broken completely, but it had cracked, and that was enough. The signal hadn't lasted more than 5 seconds, maybe less, but it was enough. In the secure communications bunker, 200 miles from the front, a low-level technician glanced up from his console, unsure if what he saw was real. The call sign was ancient, dormant since the second night of the mission. Echo 7. It blinked again, then vanished. He hesitated. 1 breath, 2. Then he slammed the alert key. Within minutes, the war room was lit in red. The message had been simple. 1 word, torchlit, not a cry for help, not coordinates. A code embedded during her team's deep prep cycle. It meant alive, not compromised. Signal unsafe. Mission intelligence active. It meant come now, come fast, don't ask questions. The director of special operations stood over the table, silent, arms folded. No questions, no speeches, just a sharp nod. He already knew. The order rolled out across 3 units into time zones. Air support scrambled. Drones rerouted. A quick response extraction team was pulled from standby. None of them knew who they were rescuing. Only the call sign. Echo-7. Back in the valley, she didn't wait to see what might follow. As soon as the transmission went out, she tore the crude transmitter apart and scattered the remains into 3 separate locations. The antenna was snapped in half and sunk into a flooded trench. The remaining wires were coiled tightly and buried beneath a rock, near an abandoned ammo crate. She didn't need a trail leading back to her. She didn't expect a response. But when she heard the drone low, high-speed, directional, she knew someone had heard. It came at dusk. The faint hum, almost mechanical, more vibration than sound. She caught it in her chest before her ears. She moved quickly. Darting beneath the cover of broken pine and thorn, the drone circled once, low and tight, then it dropped something small. Black, the size of her hand. She retrieved it, wiped off the mud. An IR tag. That confirmed it. They were coming. She triggered it, just once, lighting herself up in the infrared spectrum for a window of 5 seconds. Then she killed the tag. And moved. They'd seen her. Now she had to keep them from losing her. The next 2 hours were a blur of calculation and evasion. Paramilitary patrols had been closing in from the eastern corridor. She had to move perpendicular to their path without drawing fire, or leading them to the inbound rescue. She crept through burned-out trenches, scaled rocky ledges with bloodied hands, and dropped low beneath shattered fences. Her mind went into combat autopilot, no emotion, no second-guessing, only steps, choices, angles. As darkness settled, the forest erupted. The rescue came without warning, a thunderous roar overhead. Then light blinding, sudden swept through the trees. Blackout choppers, twin rotors spinning like blades of God. One peeled off, dropped fast into the clearing beyond the ridge. But the enemy was already close. The gunfire started before the chopper touched dirt. Muzzle flashes lit the ridge. Tracers danced across the sky like burning snakes. She was 30 meters out, pinned behind a fallen tree, radio silent. She didn't need to speak, they'd find her by movement, by heat, by instinct. She waited for the sound, a quick burst from an end of 49 friendly. To suppressed rounds answered. The team was on the ground, pushing forward. She broke cover and ran. Shots screamed past her, some close enough to sting the air near her neck. She dove, rolled, crawled beneath wire. Her hands tore open on rusted fencing. She didn't stop. A figure in matte black armor stepped from the brush, visor down, rifle raised. He spotted her, didn't hesitate. One hand reached out. She grabbed it. They ran together, ducking beneath limbs as the other operatives laid down, suppressing fire. The chopper was spooling up again. No time for a sit-rep. She didn't offer one. The last 20 feet to the bird were a sprint through chaos. Gunfire, shouted orders, smoke. One of the extraction team took a hit to the shoulder, but didn't fall. They piled into the bay, Echo 7 last. The ramp slammed shut, and just like that they were airborne. She sat on the floor, head down, blood on her face, not her own. Hands clenched into fists, breath ragged. No one spoke. They didn't need to know. One asked who she was. They already knew. The flight back was under blackout protocol. Windows covered. No lights, no comms, just the low thrum of engines cutting across enemy sky. At base, medical staff waited. She didn't speak to them either, only nodded. Her vitals were checked. Superficial wounds, fractured rib, mild hypothermia, no concussion. Not bad for someone presumed dead. When the operations director entered the room, she didn't salute, just looked up with eyes hollow from days without rest. "Did you recover anything?" he asked. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, dirty notebook, hand-stitched, pages wrinkled from water. She placed it on the table. Inside, hand-drawn schematics, patrol routes, satellite frequencies, foreign signatures, weapon movements, more than anyone had hoped. He didn't thank her. She didn't expect him to. Instead, he said, "You'll be debriefed, then cleared for 30 days off-grid. No tracking, no contact." She stood, stiffly, and replied in a voice that sounded nothing like it had before the mission, "Make it 60. He hesitated, then nodded. She walked out of the room alone. No medals, no applause, just the same silence that had carried her through the trees, the ruins, the dark, and somewhere in the command logs, buried deep behind clearance walls, a single entry was updated. Echo-7, recovered. Mission status complete. No one ever saw her face, Only the whisper left behind in a scrambled audio log from the evac bird, mission still on. Then static,